Hi, this is Derek. I've commandeered this room. This is one of the rooms in the castle that we're not really using so much. It's kind of a weird little family room. There's some comfortable couches. There's a drum set over there. There's a lot of like children's art on the walls. But I needed a place to make videos that was really quiet. So this is a room that's pretty far away from the other workspaces that we've been using for Nanowrimo. It's got some nice lamps. The lighting is not so bad. The sun is setting behind me, which is kind of really good lighting now, but I don't know how it's going to look, in 20 minutes. It gets dark fast here. It's not even 4 p.m. It's usually like dark by 4 p.m. or 4:30. It's cold outside. It's been snowing, but inside is really not so bad. So I want to talk about what to do when you're in the middle of your book, especially for Nanowrimo. We're a little more than halfway through Nanowrimo. This is usually the part where some people are behind, but then they try to catch up. You want to try to get your 50,000 words. You'll always find, I made another video about how to get through the middle of the book, and this is kind of relevant to that. But basically, when you're writing fiction, you'll get to a point, like even if you plot it out really well, you'll get to a point in the middle where not enough stuff is happening that's exciting, and you don't want to just be killing time or be focused on banal things. You want lots of new things to be happening. You can add in new characters. There should be a lot of plot developments, but you want it all to be integral to the plot. So this is challenging when you're doing Nanowrimo, because when you're just focused on word count, you're just trying to get, we've been averaging here at the castle, we all consider ourselves not very fast writers, which means we've been doing about 600 or 700 words per 50-minute writing sprint. But because we're all here full time, we do like 5 or 6 sprints a day, and we've been averaging about 3,000 words a day, which I think is pretty great. There's nothing shabby about getting 3,000 words a day. It does kind of feel like, we're not working. We're here all day, so, we should be able to produce more. But something else I've noticed is that writing fiction especially is mentally draining more than almost any other activity. So if you can get through 3,000 words a day, you may just feel brain dead. You may sleep more than usual. You may feel like dumb or frustrated because you can't write more. But if you're doing a few thousand words a day, consistency is really the key, to just keep doing it. But the problem is, when you get to kind of the middle of the book, you can't just keep writing down words, because probably you'll find out that there's a problem, that you're missing something. Your middle isn't strong enough, doesn't have enough going on, there's nothing really interesting. In almost every chapter, you want something pretty new. It can either be character development, where you're revealing more backstory, or you're setting up the relationships between the characters based on conflict. So you want to, if there's not an argument or a fight or something scary happening in every chapter, you need to add something like that in. But you also need mysteries and story questions, and there should always be, like I talked with Ingrid the other day, who's one of the other young adult authors here, about how usually you'll get to it'll be mystery until the first 15 or 25%, and then they'll meet somebody in the supernatural world who just tells them everything, and it's just like a big info dump, and now they know everything about the world, and from then on out it's just fighting and conflict. I don't like to do it that way. I think it's better if you can hold the mystery as long as possible. I try not to give away all the answers until the final battle with the antagonist, where the villain is confessing, filling in the plot holes, basically, where the villain thinks they've won. It's the dark night of the soul, and the protagonist is learning all of the stuff, filling in the last pieces of information. But before that, there should be new developments that make her want to learn more. So maybe she answers one question, but then that just opens up a new story question that she doesn't have an answer for. So she's always in the dark, but at the same time always learning. So she's always has a better understanding of what's going on, but is facing new questions, like, why is this happening? So one of the ways that I just added in my book, where I was struggling, and I had there's some good stuff and some good scenes, but there just wasn't enough, especially with her. My book's kind of a vampire dystopia, so she gets married too, but it's like an arranged marriage to a vampire prince who doesn't seem very interested in her. So she doesn't know why he doesn't like her, or why did he pick her if he doesn't actually like her, why isn't he feeding from her, stuff like that. It's not exactly about vampires because it's a futuristic dystopian setting, but there's some similar features. So I don't want my vampire prince to really be talking with her, confessing anything, because he doesn't trust her yet and he doesn't want to give anything away. But I also want her to be learning things. So it's a problem of like who has enough knowledge about the vampire world, but is also willing to be her friend and tell her these things without it being like an info dump. So on the one hand, I have another wife who's been there for a few years, and she has more information that she can feed this new character who's a new citizen of this vampire world. On the other hand, I've decided my vampire prince has a secret library. Libraries are very popular in young adults, so I can have him give her access to his huge library and secretly be marking books so that she can be discovering passages in books, which is an easy way. It's almost too easy, it's kind of a trope, but it's a way for me to, if there's any other information that she needs, like science or history, but nobody would actually tell her, I can have her find a book in a library to learn not everything, but enough to bring her forward into the story. And also that way allows my vampire prince to give her some information without revealing it to her directly, by just kind of adding little hints or notes or marking books or making it easy for her to find the books where he can kind of communicate information to her without, and kind of to see her reaction, to see if he can trust her without becoming a traitor, because confessing too much of the real story to his bride when humans aren't really supposed to know the full extent of the history of the vampire race, stuff like that. Anyway, so I'm excited that I added that that asset into my story, which is the library, which allows more information to be going on. But it is something that happens in Nanowrimo. When you get to the middle, you don't necessarily just want to push through to get to the end, because what will often happen if you feel stuck, if you just keep writing, you might write crap just to fill the page, which isn't going to be useful later. Sometimes you have to take a day off, or like in my writing sprints, instead of getting 3,000 words, I may go down a few thousand words, because I may be making a lot of notes and then taking them out, or I may be trying to restructure the plot event. So if I can just figure out what needs to happen here. Most of my chapters have 2 scenes, so I'll have like a normal scene where things are happening, a second scene where there's more conflict, and then it ends on more of a story hook or a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter to get them into reading the next chapter. But if I don't know what happens to end the chapter, it may be difficult to keep writing other chapters, or I may not be able to make progress, or I may not be able to figure out the jigsaw of the rest of my book. Probably at about halfway. I'm at about 35,000 words. So that's about halfway for me. But like I said, although I have a pretty tight plot, and I pretty much know how the next 10 chapters are going to go, I'm going to need to add in a few scenes to get where I need to go. And if you don't really know what's going to happen in the middle until you've written the first half of the book, or until you're coming across the point in the second half of the book where you know it's weak and you need to add more to get everything to flow well together. So even though I have 10 strong chapters, they're just not quite tight enough as they should be. There's not enough weaving them together. There's not enough story questions and hooks and character conflicts. So I'm going to be needing to add more backstory and more interaction with some of the other main characters to flesh their stories out, because later, like towards the end of the book, I'm going to start killing off characters, and those deaths aren't going to matter, or they're not going to be as satisfying unless the readers really like those characters in the first place, and the protagonist really likes those characters, and there's a reason that they have to die that makes it a more powerful death. So I have 3 or 4 very powerful death scenes towards the end of my book, which is almost too many. Really, you should do like 1 or 2. I don't know that I will use them all. I might save some for book 2. But those death scenes aren't going to matter unless you have lighter scenes where the protagonist is like getting along or becoming friendly, or even just, bonding scenes. Like they might be in the library reading silently together. That's a bonding scene that makes the relationship tighter, which will make it a more painful emotional death when the death has to happen later. It will become a more emotional death if my protagonist has to be responsible for choosing. Sometimes you'll have something like you have to choose which character to save, or you'll have to choose, does the character want to save her friend or her mother, or save the human race or her mother. Like there should always be an impossible choice for your characters, which makes them somehow responsible, or at least feel guilty about the deaths that are coming. But that's something you really have to set up. So it can't just be like a sudden, surprising death. And you'll see this in movies all the time. There will always be like a touching scene where right before somebody dies, right before there's a big story decision, it will be important to show two characters flirting or getting along or having fun together, or like being really like family time where a character is just reflecting and saying, you know, I'm so happy everything worked out. I'm in a really good place right now. I thought this was a mistake, but I'm so happy I followed you on your journey. I feel really good about where we are. That's usually an indication that the character is going to die. Like they're making peace, and they're in a place where they're satisfied, and they're redeeming their relationships or telling other characters how much they mean to them. That's some of the stuff you want to do in the setup before you kill a character to make it more impactful. So this discussion's kind of got off topic, but my point was, during Nanowrimo, when you get to the middle of Nanowrimo and you're feeling stuck, it's usually not, it doesn't mean you just have to keep pushing through. It doesn't, like if you're stuck and unsatisfied with the story, which you probably will be in the middle of writing the book, because always when you get to the middle of writing the book, you've gotten halfway and now you can see different things. So now is the place where you can revise the plot and add new scenes and fix things that aren't working, and recognize what you're going to have to go back and fix. It's not the time to just plow forward to the ending. It's really worth taking a day or two off, or taking at least a few writing sessions, and don't worry about the word count, worry more about strengthening the plot, because even if you plot out in the beginning, there's a midway point when you get to the middle where you will recognize more problems and you can really tighten the plot and fix the plot, and that needs to happen. So if you're stuck in Nanowrimo, if you feel like you've lost your way, or you don't know where you're going, or you feel like you're just spinning your wheels to write more words but it's not satisfying because you don't feel like they're useful, you may like write great scenes that don't fit your plot, and you know that already. So that's what happens with most Nanowrimo projects, is you get to the end and you have your 50,000 words, but you have an unfixable plot because you've written too many scenes that don't fit your story, and it's really difficult to cut those scenes out. So if you had plotted better, and like I said, you can't plot the full book at the beginning, you kind of just make an outline, but in the middle, you're going to recognize that you need to fix things. So maybe this video will help you if you are halfway through Nanowrimo but feeling like you're stuck, which is extremely common and almost a necessary part of the writing process. So you need to recognize that there's nothing wrong with feeling frustrated or stuck when you get to the halfway point, because that's very normal and that's necessary. It's a good sign if you get there. It's a good sign that you notice. If your book sucks in the middle and you notice, that's wonderful. Then you know what you can do to fix it. If you don't notice anything and you just plow through and you write your 50K, hopefully like when the book is done, you'll notice it sucks and you'll be able to fix it, but it's going to be more difficult to fix it at that point. It's really important to slow down when you get to the middle of the book and map things out better, add in tension, add in scenes, really focus on strengthening the book, even if that makes it longer than 50K, because the normal book is going to be longer than 50K anyway. So even if you don't write out full scenes and you just flesh out like, I need to add a scene here, I need to add a scene here, this has to happen here, even if you're just making notes, and then before going forward, it's worthwhile to do, because then when you finish your book, like when I finish a book, when I finish a rough draft, then I'll start going back and I'll clean up the writing. It shouldn't be good writing your first draft when you get through it. It should still suck pretty bad, but at least the plot should be tight. Then you can go back and it's just polishing, improving the writing, improving the description and detail, what the characters are wearing, what they look like, the background setting. That's the stuff that you add in the second pass or third pass. And then you do the proofreading and the cleaning up and the styling, avoiding repetition or overuse of certain phrases or words if you have developed bad writing habits. For example, in young adult, there's this scene where the love interest will lean against the wall. They'll like lean seductively against the wall, or they'll lean over the protagonist. If you do that too often in the book, it's going to get pretty annoying. So you have to know to recognize the scenes that you're overusing to try to cut them out, or use other body, like instead of she clasped her hands behind her back, or she did some, she put her hands through her hair. If you continue to rely on the same body language, that's something you're going to need to fix. So you fix that stuff. You don't really fix the writing or make it like high quality writing until the third or fourth pass, if ever. I usually don't even do that because your story matters most, and I know that the difference between like a well-plotted story that's pretty good writing and that final pass where I make the writing, beautiful, that's not really going to impact my sales very much. So it's not something I personally worry about. I know a lot of authors who go back and they polish the shit out of their writing and make it all really beautiful, but if they don't have a powerful plot that keeps readers' attention, that's really the most important thing. It's just a plot that keeps readers' attention all the way through the end. If they haven't done that, cleaning up the writing isn't going to matter. So it's nice. A lot of readers like it. It might be worth doing if you already have a tightly plotted novel that's selling really well. You may be able to get better reviews or more sales if you go back and you make the writing better, but that's not going to be the difference between a successful book and a not successful book. It's going to be the plotting and the pacing and the character development. Anyway, so I'm going to stop this video here. This is basically a video about what to do if you get stuck in the middle, or especially a mid-Nanowrimo catch-up, because a lot of people might be Googling, I'm stuck, I'm 35,000 words, which is what I am. I'm like more than halfway through my Nanowrimo novel, but I've run out of ideas, or I don't know what else to add. So maybe this video will help in that regard.